Welcome, everybody, to yet another installment of the Directors Cut for the Santa Clarita International Film Festival. I can't believe we're doing this. We've been doing it every month. It's been taken off really, really well. And this month, we have K Pontuti joining us, who is the director, correct? If I'm correct, for
director and producer.
Wonderful.
One of the producers.
So Kay's project, The Yellow Wallpaper, which was absolutely phenomenal from the looks, the aesthetics, the period, but I'm not going to steal thunder. So I am definitely going to let her talk to, the project, what it was, how it got there. But first and more importantly, Kay, we always start with the director and the producer. We love to know the journey and the story and how you got here, what brought you to the steps that got you to Yellow Wallpaper. So as cheesy as this sounds, tell us about yourself.
My name's K Pontuti, and I'm in Northern California. My partner and I, my wife, Alexandra Loreth, who plays the lead, really, did this project together. And, I have to say it was her idea originally, 100%. And she was a big driving force in the project too. We were both really, really passionate about the story, and I had read it ages ago. And I remember Lexi kind of saying, "You've got to read this story. I think you'll really like it."
Time out. So forgive my ignorance. So it's actually a book that was modified?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So this is an adaptation.
Okay.
And so the book, it's a short story that it came from, and it was written by Charlotte Perkins Gilman back in the late 1890s. Mm-hmm. It's a fairly well-known piece of feminist literature. Mm-hmm. We actually teach it in some of the classes that at the university I work in, and
we're going to talk about that then. Hold on, we definitely are going to talk about that too.
Yeah, for sure. So she kind of brought the project to me and kind of locked me in my office. Basically said, "You can't come out until you read this." And I was like, "Oh my God." I came out and it was just like, we've got to do this. And it made so much sense for us.
Very strong woman's piece. Absolutely. That I saw hands down in a very wonderful kind of way of telling it. Right. Not necessarily overtly so, in my opinion, but take a couple steps back, because like I said, I love to hear about the person behind the project. So you told me already about that. Obviously you're, a teacher, right, at a university. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Have you always been a director and a producer as well? How did you fall into that? Tell me the story again.
So I come from I really do come from like a fine art background, and have been working in this kind of contemporary art space of making paintings and drawings and sculptures for, years and years. That was my undergraduate and graduate work. I did my master's at Syracuse a while back, and really come at things from, with this sort of, I think, more of a, kind of contemporary art or that sort of background, and got into, making films later. I made a variety of short films and kind of a featurette before this. Okay. But this was really my first feature, and I should say our first feature in terms of, the team. Yep. And it was, so I come from there. I teach at University of the Pacific in Northern California, fantastic school up in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. And
you teach film as well, or storytelling, or?
Yeah. So I definitely teach a lot of film classes, kind of, really kind of approaching, from a transmedia standpoint. Have done some VR projects, one that, did really well in the festival circuit a few years ago. Nice. And so kind of, that's one, that's kind of like the general gist. Okay. While I was making this film, and you've probably seen in the credits, I'm credited with a slightly different name than I have now. Yes. Making this film, I think, was one of a number of things that helped me move forward in terms of my transition. And there's a whole lot to probably unpack there, but
we can or we cannot. It's entirely up to you.
I mean, we'll ease into it a little.
Okay.
But I think it should be noted because the credits are what they are, and at that time, so I think that's a really exciting thing and something I've been thinking a lot about also over the last couple of years. So
and forgive again, but this question, but was the movie part of that? I mean, just again, the feminist nature of it and the strength of her finding herself, or I mean, was there any inspiration, or you just it happened to be really interesting?
Yeah, it's been a fascinating, and I do talk pretty openly about my process with my transition and the sort of like how I've used art, not just the filmmaking, but also the drawing and painting and exhibition work I do as a way to kind of like, explore that both internally, but then also, externally with, hopefully, helping other people see what it's like through storytelling. So, so it was definitely, I don't know at the time that I really knew necessarily that, and it took me a little while to kind of piece it together.
When did you start with the project? Let's like how long a period? Because I mean, obviously, this was the attention to the detail, the costume, the design, all of it. I mean, this was not something that was thrown together in a year. I mean, so
correct.
So when did the inception start? And somehow in my head, I feel like there is the journey between you and the character seems to be a little bit, like I said, not coincidental, right? So but what was the year-long process that went with that? Years, I should say.
Okay, so backing it up to the beginning, I think we started that moment of coming out of the office and and starting writing. I think that must have been like 2019, 2018, and so there was I think about a year-long process, or at least 6 months of writing the script and adapting, going from something that was very, the original story is all told from a first person perspective.
Yep.
And so we had, there have been some other adaptions done as films, but usually with, I think, more of like a theatrical sort of, stage play rather than a more cinematic experience, which is what we were really kind of after. Yep. And, so with that in mind, a lot of times when I'm initially thinking about, film, I think in images and sounds and then a lot of times the writing happens, at the same time as that. So as I'm
that's your visual arts that you think is
So I'm like, I've got mood boards and I'm sketching and I'm, these images come to me and all throughout the process, I think it evolves and it typically goes from this kind of like fuzzy sort of, I like to say like this fuzzy form into something that gets sharper kind of throughout the process. And so once we had kind of decided to do it, we did some crowdfunding. We raised some money both through that and through some other means, and then really got into like where are we going to shoot it, and I think that was one of the big things that really altered the trajectory of the project. In the original story, it's kind of implied that it has this sort of New England feel, 1890s, and in the majority of the film, as you've seen, takes place in one house, one room. There's a lot of, the idea is that, I don't know if I need to throw in the log line, or the premise, but like, she's taken from, she's a writer, a creative artist, and is taken out to a country house to help her, rest and recover and get over her postpartum depression that she's had with recently having a baby. And so, with this idea, it was also one of the reasons that we felt like we could do a really good job with it. because it was, one location primarily, a house and gardens. And so that, so we were, working, thinking about like where that would happen. And so I had initially planned on building a set or a stage, using our stage at the university to, create the interior, and because we're like, through the film, as it progresses, she starts seeing things in the wallpaper and peeling them off and, kind of destroys not to give it away, but kind of destroys the room. Yeah. And we're like, we're going to have a really hard time finding a location that lets us do that. And so that, sent us down this path of like, well, we're going to have to build a set. Yeah. And as that was happening, we had been, I'd been in Ireland for a film festival with one of our short films at the Richard Harris Film Festival. And our, we had met our co-producers, Emerald Giant Productions there. They run the film festival. And as, we were driving around, I was like, wow, that's the house, that's the exterior. Yeah. And I was like, do you happen to know anybody who has a house like that? And I remember one of our co-producers saying, well, I've got a house that kind of looks like that. And I was like, wow, okay. So we could get our establishing exteriors in Ireland. We can come back, to build the set, on the stage, and it's all kind of coming together that way. And then started, also then realizing that like, well, how are we going to, there are a lot of exterior shots in gardens, and Irish producers, or not Irish producers, Irish actors, US actors. How are we going to get them, what do we do here? Together,
a lot of logistics. Agreed.
Yeah. And so we were initially, casting, we had our lead, Alexandra, who's my partner and co-producer. Yeah. And so we knew that she, it was just a fantastic, subtle actor. If I have to throw that in there, but she's amazing. And, but then we were like, well, maybe we can cast the rest of the, in Ireland. And then, Emerald Giant found us some like amazing locations over there, and actually found an old,
so was this all shot in Ireland then? Is that what I'm
hearing? It was all shot in Ireland. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we moved, with not a lot of lead time. Yep. With it maybe a few months, we were like, let's do the whole thing over here. And one of our other co-producers, Peter Galante from the US, had gone over and was doing some scouting over there. And they found this old convent that Emerald Giant had found. We're like, oh my God, like this is like, perfect. Like, you can do whatever you want. It's like half in disarray. And so they're like, you can put up the wallpaper, you can tear it off. You still
must have needed like a really good production designer, right? I mean, this, I would think that the actual sets, because the authenticity of like the period. So was the production designer in Ireland as well? Or was that a US person that you took over there?
It was definitely a collaboration. Peter Galante was was our main, head production designer, art director, but also worked with, Elizabeth May and Sylvia Moore and the whole kind of team we had. The John Kennedy, like there was a whole, we went over with like the ideas and what we wanted. And like most, small budget films, we had to adapt, a lot of that. We had our costume designer, Kathy McClellan, somebody I had worked with the University of the Pacific, had designed and put together this wonderful costume document with all the designs and the plans and who's wearing what phases of the film, because we really wanted the wardrobe, especially of the lead character, to mirror her mental state and become more kind of in disarray throughout the film. Right. So Kathy had put together, this wonderful document and had built some of the main costumes. From
scratch?
What's that?
I was like, from scratch?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my Lord.
Yes. So the main gowns and the robe is all like hand embroidered and
Okay.
made from
That's
scratch.
impressive. That's impressive.
So the production design.
So it's not like you went to some costume shop and was like, I need a Victorian period piece dress with a bustle in the back.
No, no. Actually, that was, so the woman in the film and the story is assumed to be named Jane.
Yep.
And so Jane's outfit that she's wearing, because most of the time she's in the room.
Yep.
She's wearing these gowns, and so we really knew those needed to be to withstand scrutiny, visual scrutiny, and to do something really kind of cool and creative with. But
yep.
And then from that document, our Irish producers found the rest over there, and even the location we were working at, they actually had some there that we used, which were really great.
Oh, really? So it was a blended team. It was really kind of like got it.
Really, really blended. Like we brought Sonia Tippin, Sippin. It has a T, but it's pronounced Sippin.
Okay.
Amazing woman, DP from LA. This was her first feature, and we hit it off like really early on, and we were doing cinematographers, and we knew we wanted as much of a woman team as we could put together. We tried to get as many since it's such that kind of story. But Sonia was able to photograph like the sets in a way that even added more to the that combination. The production design, the lighting, all kind of coming together.
That's why I said it was very visual. To me, it was like a lot of visual. It was very visually artistic, which makes sense now, coming from kind of the visual artist in you as well, right? So how long then did you shoot? I mean, I'm assuming it was over a summer. If you were on break, or as a so how long was talk to me about the production schedule. Talk to me about kind of like with a blended team. How did that work? I mean, obviously you're living there in Ireland at that point until this project gets done. So
yes, it was very short.
Oh, really? I thought it was like 30 days or more than that.
Well, so I think I arrived in Ireland. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember now. I think I was in Ireland for like a total of maybe a month.
Okay.
Peter Galante had gone over, I think, a week or so earlier, and had been there even prior to that, doing some things and working with kind of sorting out and some of the getting some of the furniture built that we built. We built like the bed that's in the room, kind of from scratch.
So those were like carpenters that you sourced in Ireland.
Yeah.
Clear designs of like, this is what we're looking for. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but I mean, I think I had 2 weeks in Ireland to prep, which was a short amount of time with our Irish actors. Very short. And then we had a 15-day shoot.
Wow. Full feature in 50. Everyone's telling me that features can be done in 15 days. And I'm like, how do you do it and not kill yourself? So I ask you, how did you do it and not kill yourself?
Well,
was it the location? Was that part of it, that it was easier since most of it was in one location? So you didn't have company moves, and that's a big part. Okay.
Absolutely. And that was something we knew going in, that if, to be able to maximize our budget, we had to be really, really smart from a producing standpoint in terms of as little traveling as possible. And one of the things that this amazing location afforded us is that it was an old convent and had like a dorm. And so we lived, ate, slept, showered, as a team there.
Yeah.
Which
very really, bonding almost, right? Like it's almost
and getting to know everybody really fast, right? And all that. And that's not always easy. That, there's lots of being
personalities and under the gun and pressure and long hours. And yeah, absolutely. And then you don't get to escape from it. You all have to stay there.
Yeah. And then we're all there. So we, there's definitely times I think everyone took a walk. Okay. I remember, I think, probably each of us took at least, I probably took even more, but I think we all had to every once in a while take a walk, put things in perspective sometimes, because it is a lot of pressure. Yeah. In a short period of time. And
how long were your days, just out of curiosity? I mean, when you're 15-day shoot.
We tried to keep it 10-hour days.
Really? Oh, wow. Okay.
And we only went over a couple of times. Our first AD, Steven, was really, really great and really helped keep us to that, and really made it a conversation when we knew if we were about to go over. He was really able to, I think, take a really empathetic and and responsible, and he would ask the crew, are you willing, willing to do this? It wasn't like a given. It wasn't he made it a real.
Must do it. You must die and sweat and bleed for this, and with no questions asked. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And I know that, there's plenty of times when, people on their own kind of went over prepping or, in terms of the above the line team for sure. But also I think some of the, a lot of people on the team at all levels were pretty committed to the project because of the story and the opportunity to do a film like this.
So after you were done shooting, did you actually get to enjoy Ireland, or did you come right back?
Vacation is what we came pretty much right back. Okay. There was just having been there a while and having pets and, the other kind of life stuff. I would have loved to. And I've been able to explore Ireland a number of times.
Because I'd love for you to enjoy it. I guess that's what I'm kind of getting.
And I have. Right? I absolutely have. And even when we were there, there's a lot of enjoyment. There's these little, each morning I would get up and go through the day and draw some storyboards even, or think about. And I remember looking out the window and just being able to be oh my God, we are so lucky to be here doing this and to have those little thankful moments along the way. Yeah. But also knowing that that part of getting through it alive is, it's barely. Yeah. It definitely took its toll, and a lot of time to kind of recover. So it's doable, but it's, you need to be well prepared.
And that's why I'm just in awe right now. Cause I've talked to so many directors who are we did it in 15 days, but oh Lord, I wasn't standing afterwards, So I was just I always just shake my head. I haven't been able to figure out the formula yet, but that's a different story for a different day. So obviously with something that tight, that intense, a lot of things can go wrong, right? So tell me one of the kind of moments where we were oh my God, we're never going to recover from this. Or that was where you're I'm taking a very long walk. Just leave me alone for a while.
One of the struggles that I think was, and we knew this was going to be a struggle from the beginning, but it was so stressful. There's a the story's about a young mother, right? Mm-hmm. So young mother implies a baby.
That's right.
Right. And so we knew, early on, we all said we're going to need a baby for some of these shots,
right?
And everybody's oh yeah, there's babies everywhere.
Grab a baby, take a baby, you're a baby, they're a baby.
And I'm trying to remember how many times the baby got postponed, and it kind of got. And I remember one day, okay, the baby's coming. We got a baby, and we, there's definitely a lot of rules around having children on set. And we were really, really.
I was actually just about to ask you, do the same rules apply internationally as they do in the States from like a time. And sometimes you need to have twins in the whole 9 yards. So
we they're slightly different, I think, but I think the general premise is the same.
Right.
It's, I didn't hear anything about I don't know anything about the twins, but we literally only needed a few shots. And then for a lot of the film, we used a baby doll, like a
baby doll,
good looking doll.
Yeah.
And so the baby was supposed to come one day. We had prepared the afternoon, and last minute, baby's not coming. And it's like, after like 3 or 4 times, you're just like, of rearranging the day then, and poor Steven, the AD, is just like, okay, well, what are we going to, when are we going to shoot? And we're like, okay, I'm like, and he and I would just be like, we're going over here and we're doing these, and we're, and there was definitely some other, so that was a big one that was like, I remember at one point, like I had to walk, take a little walk. There's a number, and, there's definitely some times along the way too, where because we were being pretty ambitious, and the script was pretty ambitious. There's times I had to cut things, on, and I kind of knew that going in, there might be some of that. And I kind of had like the list of the things in my head that like, would be cuttable, or maybe we got more out of from something we had just shot, where I'm like, I maybe not, this is so strong. I may not really need this thing that I thought I needed in the script. But there was also like a number of conversations with Steven and eventually with some of the other producers around like, this is taking too long. Like, we've got to move. And I'm like, we don't have the scene yet. And this is where I had to kind of say,
and that's a classic battle, right? Between the AD and it's like, no, we've got a schedule. We got to, and it's like, no, but we don't have the shot. Yeah. The shot is good. And back and around.
Yeah. There's definitely a fair bit of that, but we had a good, push and pull, because every time, that would happen, I was able to say like, this is really, really important to me. And then he would back off, and I would also usually say, this is really important to me, and I know what I'm going to cut. I know what I'll give it back to you later. I'll give you the time back. And I think, initially I think that was pretty difficult. I don't know, because the trust, we had just met, like we had literally, he had shown up, funny story. He had shown up thinking he was the second AD, and
surprise.
And we're in a meeting, and it's like 3 days before shooting. And I'm like, no, dude, I think you're first AD. He's like, no, I'm second AD. I'm like, that's not what I know. And so we had a crash course, and so there wasn't like, he didn't know whether he could trust me to give it back. Right. And so that, establishing that trust, once that happened, then we were good, about halfway through the project, there's this, okay, there,
if he says it means it's going to happen type of thing.
She's like, if I say, I remember, multiple times where, and Steven definitely, I'm sure, had to take a couple walks. I can remember one specifically, but that became also like a way of joking about like, okay, let's all take a walk.
That's right.
And come back to the, that idea of like, it's a real privilege to be doing this.
It is. Absolutely. I think we lose sight of that. That's a great point. So film is wrapped. How long does post take to get it where you want it to be?
Well, the interesting thing about the post is, this is again, very fortunate that we were able to shoot the summer before the pandemic hit.
Right.
So, thank goodness for that.
Right.
And then post-production though, I had gotten back, I guess, and, within less than a month, I started editing, and
so you edited yourself?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. With the help of Alexandra, who was my second set of eyes, and so I did the editing myself. But my sound, my sound team, one was in Wisconsin, somebody I used to work with when I used to teach there, and our composer for the score was somebody that used to be at University of the Pacific, who had retired and was now in Oregon. And, we knew that we were going to probably be doing some remote, work, but we didn't realize how much.
Surprise.
Yeah. So we really kind of had to figure out how we were going to do this, especially once I had gotten, a rough cut together. I kind of knew the kind of music that I had wanted. But that definitely even evolved a bit. I'm thinking back to the process. And so to answer your question more concisely, post took a lot longer than I think it normally would have. If I had, number one, if I would have, had an editor that I could offload the whole thing to, and they could do it full time. But also, even once I had the edit locked, we then were still in the pandemic and navigating this sort of new way of sharing files, and again, doing it on a relatively meager budget. There was that sort of like, we couldn't all be in the same room listening together.
And I was actually just about to ask you that. I was like, so in your head, you would have preferred, let's lock ourselves in a room together. What do you see? What do I hear? But there was a lot more of kind of, God knows we're in this Zoom world now, right? We're even doing it now. But that being said, now having seen both sides of that coin, right? Do you still go back to, I want to lock us all in a room? Or do you say, hey, no, I've totally been able to shift my perspective, and I can see another way of doing this, and how just media in general can be expanded or worked in a different way? I mean, just kind of curious.
One of, I think the, back to that trust sort of issue, or not an issue, but the importance of having the trust. I had really trusted both, having worked with them both. Like I had the trust between, Edgy Cober, who did our sound, and Robert Coburn, who was doing the music. But they had really never met. And so not being together took away a lot of that sort of like, we're real people. Right. And it took longer for for that sort of work together.
There's still a humanity that needs to happen. And at the end of the day, the projects and the product that we put out is a human aspect, right? So how do you really connect? We've learned ish, right, in the past 3 years, but like, how do you really connect to feel each other's hearts and energy and stuff like that, right? But now looking back, having done that, you still think that's doable, trust or not? I guess.
I mean, we proved it was doable. Preferable, I don't know. I think there's a lot. I mean, obviously, I think there's a lot of things that happen where, my I think approach going forward would be to make sure we had people together, at least for a little bit, and going through some maybe the bigger concepts or working, and then everybody could,
go their own way
and then come back.
So basically, at least a workshop where we lock everyone in a room, and then go do your thing, and then let's come back later again at some point.
Exactly. And I think especially for the final mix.
Yes.
The doing the final mix completely remotely
is tough. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, Yeah, no, and I mean that, and I think
because you're dealing with different speakers, different sound systems as well, and I hear you. Trust me, I hear you.
Yeah. So yes, but it is kind of awesome to be able to do it if you have to.
Yeah.
I love the people, like all the people that were, involved. Like I'd spend as much time with them as I could. I think they're just good people to work with.
So it's the project has done the circuit, or are you still doing the circuit, or?
So interesting pandemic sort of approach.
Yeah.
We were one of the films that we had waited, trying to decide what to do when the pandemic hit. We were done at a certain point, and it's such a, I mean, I know most filmmakers say this, but it's such a in-person
it is
film.
Agreed.
And we were really trying to hold out, but then there was a point where it's like, well, we really can't, or at least we thought we couldn't. Right. And, it's like, there's just there's money involved, there's expectations, questions,
and I think especially after you put in so much time and effort and blood and sweat and tears, I mean, you want to see it on a 30-foot screen. You want to hear the sound coming in through you want to be able to see your names coming up on that. Right. There's something about that. Not that it has to be validated, but that way, but there's still something important that comes with that versus, hey, let me just throw it up on my computer screen and do an airdrop to my TV. And I totally get it. Totally agreed. So you've done the circuit then, or you're still in the process considering
what happened. It's been interesting because we had this sort of virtual circuit run. We had a whole bunch of festivals, virtually. And that would have been, 2020, 2021. And then, and the film came out in 2022, was released in the US, Canada, a little over a year ago. But as that was happening, as things were opening back up, and also I think as people were realizing how the story kind of connected to the pandemic.
Yes, the isolation, the going crazy almost, right? The finding yourself in those voices in your head. Agreed. Which so many people felt, and it wasn't just a postpartum thing, was it? It was something a lot bigger, deeper, human that connected all of us.
Absolutely, and the thing about it is that during the pandemic, is that really the film you want to watch? You're kind of living it. True. So then we got this kind of second round of interest, and we're doing some more in-person festivals. SCIFF being one of them, and continuing to get invited, to festivals or for screenings, because we didn't really have a theatrical release, and so. But it's been just interesting to kind of see how it's evolved. It's taken some twists and turns that, obviously some big ones that we weren't expecting,
right?
But then the ebb and flow of how a film gets released these days. And
agreed.
It's wild. It's interesting, especially when we're talking about kind of artist driven indie film, and so that. That's been kind of wild. And honestly, I hadn't seen it on a big screen. I didn't get to see it right away. It took me, I'm trying to remember which festival. I think it was the Duluth Film Festival just last year where I finally saw it.
Yeah. Cause you guys weren't able to make it down, I don't think, right?
No. And it was wild because the festivals that were in person ended up being places we couldn't travel to, during the pandemic. It played in Italy, it played in Germany, and but we couldn't travel, know. And even though they were able to do the screenings there, because it died down, I guess. I mean, either we weren't allowed to fly yet in some cases. In other cases, we just weren't sure we were going to get home ever. Because you end up getting COVID in France and stuck there.
You're stuck there. Yeah.
And then what do you do? So we had that happen in Ireland. Like it screened theatrically at a festival. At the Kerry International Film Festival, and we couldn't go. Our Irish producers got to go. That was great, but we had not been able to. And that was a kind of a big bummer, because we wanted to be able to celebrate, but we did it other ways. And so it's still it's on, you can, watch it on iTunes, Amazon. And
that's what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you about like kind of the distribution part of which is the final part of every, right. Where can people watch it? Is it being released or is it still doing the theater or the festival? That's kind of what I was getting at.
It's out. It came, I think sometime last summer. I can't remember exactly the dates, but and I'm confusing sometimes the US, the Canada, and then it still hasn't been released widely in Europe. It's been released in Scandinavia. Our sales agent is working on UK right now and some other places, but it's still like finding its way around, but it is happening, and that's really exciting. Our initial distributor and sales agent, Mutiny Pictures, merged with Bayview Entertainment, or acquired by Bayview, and so they just did a Blu-ray release that is really exciting. So that was I think that was maybe in April. And it had already been out on DVD, but I don't think it'd been out on Blu-ray yet. So they're doing it in waves and
keep the momentum going and the excitement going. I'm assuming. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's great to be able to see it, and to share it with people and send Blu-rays to friends.
So what's next on the projects for you? Right now this baby's out into the world and it's doing its thing and it's growing up. And so anything in the pipeline in terms of next projects or?
So I've got 2 scripts, one that's finished and one that is still in process. I'm really excited about both. And I was, when was it? I've gone to Cannes the last 2 years, and not this year, but the year before, I was pitching and doing some meetings because we were really kind of, a lot of them that we were kind of coming off of, the wallpaper release. This year, I was in Cannes, and I was less pitching and more getting inspired,
enjoying.
And I typically take a group of students each year, and so this year we had 5 students come, and it's always fantastic to see them get their minds blown, where it's like you can't imagine it until you're there, and
that's
even
right.
then, it blows my mind each year. But
it's almost more fun to go, like, I don't want to say as a tourist, but as the ability to enjoy versus it being a business trip. That's what I feel like. It's like you're in this beautiful place and you're surrounded by all this entertainment and creativity. And obviously just, the magnitude of how big it is, right? And it's like, well, we get to enjoy it a little bit, right? Like, just like that's why I asked, did you actually get to enjoy Ireland and just, the enjoyment factor of it?
Yeah. And Cannes, this year was a lot about like I said, watching lots of films. I watched so many films this year, and it really, allowed me to think through, just to be inspired and really kind of think about like what, which of these 2 projects or that I was ready to move forward with. And I've spent this last year doing art exhibitions, which has been kind of interesting.
Wonderful. So you're back into visual arts. Okay, great.
I've made a big shift. And when I realized, and this is maybe, getting in maybe some of it's the creative and the personal, I needed something that I could, I needed some of that immediate gratification that I don't usually get with film, where it's like sure, I can write every day, or I'm editing every day, and every day and every day. And every day. I realized like I really needed to get back into my drawing, which is the kind of the core of a lot of my image making in general.
Yep.
And so I have this practice where I draw like every day, almost every morning. It's one of the first things I do. And, it's almost like when I try and do yoga, where it's like, if I can just get to the yoga mat for 5-10 minutes, and then once I get there, like I might be there for 10 minutes, I might be there for an hour. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I really kind of put that drawing practice dead center. Like, okay, it's going to be one of the first things I do. The email can wait. And I'm going to do at least, 10 or 15 minutes and see where it goes. So
well, it's a muscle, right? You've got to keep on flexing it. And that's how it gets better.
Yes. Yeah. And that's been really great. I had 2 solo shows this year, which was a lot. And a lot like making a movie, actually. The more I realized, like, doing these I do a lot of like installation based work. So there's a whole bunch of like pre-production
that has to go into it.
Yeah. And then like, there's that like,
ta-da, the big show.
Ta-da. And then there's the recovering from that.
Which people don't really realize, like the recovery part of it after it's all done. But agree. Agreed. And it's funny because you're the second artist that has told me this in 2 days. I just actually interviewed a musician for our podcast, and she was like, same thing. She said, I like music more than film. She said, I love film, but it's that instant gratification. It's the same thing. It's like film, you kind of work on it, and by the time it actually comes out the other end, and she's like, I just want to get up there and I want to be in front of people and I want to interact with people. And it sounds like the same kind of wonderful, energetic flow that you're describing as well, that keeps you motivated, driven, inspired, all of the above. I don't know. So
absolutely. Yeah. 100%. And I think those things can really feed each other. And that's one of the things that I've realized is that, these ideas, we're multidimensional, very complex people. Right. And so, keeping the input and the output and all this big, mess of a fuzziness into ideas that come out as different things, right? Yeah. Like, I'm so excited by that process. And I'm really, like I do want to make another film, and I'm hoping that, might not be this summer, but I need to finish that script. And because I've already got some people interested, which is kind of amazing. So it's like, I've got a good pitch for it, and it's very personal. And so there's
momentum. It's like once you get in that flow, it starts to just happen, right? Like it's like the next one and the next one and the next one. So I am not surprised at all that you have people interested. Not at all.
Making that first one is the tough one. I think the first one. I think there's it's proof. It becomes proof that a short doesn't really have. And so I think that's you think about what I learned through that process is I think something I talk to my students about a lot too is like, what's it, like, how do you prepare for something like that? And all that good stuff.
Well, that's actually a great segue, because this is always the question I try to end with is, advice to up and coming or other colleagues, or whether filmmakers or artists, or you just said what I talk to my students about. That's why I said that's a great segue is like, what would you tell someone, right? In terms of what piece of advice, what wonderful nuggets could you give someone who either is an artist but thinks, oh, I can't transition into film, or is, just that filmmaker who's stuck and just, much like me, I said, I don't know if I can do a feature in 15 days, right? And you're like, no, you can. This is how, what is that piece of advice that you would share with your colleagues or with your students or?
First one is that you're never going to be ready. At least to the level that I've gotten here. Maybe there's somebody out there who's, like, always ready, but I think there is, and I've talked to some of those, a lot of people where it's like, oh, well, it's going to evolve, it's an evolution rather than a, like, oh, we're literally,
it's a journey.
Or maybe, it's like, I know when you're doing like, I don't know, but I'm assuming when you're doing like the big Marvel films, I know enough about previs, and I've got a friend at DreamWorks, and we talk about, it's like, oh, this stuff's locked like in previs in a lot of cases, or some things have to be. So, but for indie films, I think, and especially if you're thinking about like, making your first one, like keep the budget as low as possible. Don't try and pitch somebody a $10-20 million movie when you've made a short film,
Yeah. Right.
And I think like keeping, like find something, find something you can do for a relatively low budget. To give yourself both that control, because with other people's money comes other people's control.
That's right.
And I think that also get a good lawyer just to help you with paperwork and
that's right.
Keep you on track. I think that, that's always important, but I think really kind of, I challenged one of my students recently to do this. I was like, okay, think of a feature that you could shoot in 3 days.
Like the little lab or the contest that they have where they
I know like, was it Josephine Decker had done, I think I'm trying to remember the name of it. It might have been, I think it was Butter on the Latch. I remember seeing that at a festival maybe 10 years ago. It was one of her first couple of films. And I believe that she shot it over like a weekend or a week at a some sort of retreat or something, but it was like very ethereal, not heavily narrative driven by any means, but absolutely beautiful, moving. But it was like this other way of making a film, and I think that it becomes a way to like, or thinking about like theater, where like, oh, we're gonna rehearse, and then we're gonna do a show. Like you can make a film that way. Right. So, so
agreed.
So in this sort of like thinking like, well, what is it, like really think about what your goals are. And know that there's like a lot of ways, a lot of possibilities, depending on what your goals are. If your goal is to get a film on Netflix, that's going to have a very specific
look, like, feel, niche, sound.
And even then it's like, well, Netflix is hiring their own people now. So I think kind of like having like realistic goals, thinking about ways to be creative. And I think the last thing I always like to say is, like if possible, not everybody can do this, but if possible, like, be ready to be on your feet or to be, I usually like to say get in shape, but I know that, like I've been thinking about like, well, that doesn't work for everyone. But I think that, there's lots of ways to think about getting in shape, and, a lot of film sets, you're on your feet.
You're on your feet a lot. That's right.
And,
actually, one of the ADs I work with, right before he does any feature, he actually starts training his legs. Like he's like, I got to get the legs ready. I got to get the legs ready. I got to get the legs ready, and it's true. You're on your feet.
Yeah. I've actually had a couple of situations in classes where I've said, okay, the thing will be like, okay, so, somebody will say like, well, I want to be a filmmaker. It's like, well, do you like being on your feet a lot? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, being on set, if you want to work on set, it's usually you're on your feet a lot, And if somebody says like, I want to be an animator. Like, okay, so you want to sit at a desk all day and work on an assembly line. And and they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, most of, you don't go outside much as an animator.
Yep.
And so
you're staring at the color green or like one line moving for 14 hours a day.
Yeah. Which can be awesome if you're into that.
Yeah.
So a lot of, I think, some of that we can do in education. Other things, it just has to happen by trying it. Right.
Agreed.
Like, I'm sure you've, I can guarantee that you've like learned those kinds of things throughout your career of like, oh my God, I love doing this, but I can't do it all day.
No.
And then these other things, you're like, I thought I'd really like this.
Yep. But I really don't. I can't. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Right. You gotta try it. You gotta try it. You gotta get out there and you gotta live. And that's the only way that you figure out what you like. So
exactly.
So any parting thoughts before we wrap up?
Thank you both for this opportunity and also for screening the film. You
guys were wonderful. We were happy to have you. I mean, we're new, we're growing ourselves, we're exploding, which blows my mind.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I like what you've put together. Having been involved in some friends who run film festivals, and I mean the role of the festival is, I think, sometimes thankless, and an incredible amount of work that often goes, without the recognition and the thanks that it should. So,
well, we appreciate.
I'm going to send lots, we appreciate
thank
you and love your way, because it really, it's one of the, we make films for people to see them, and without festivals to show them, and especially festivals that, that work hard to make sure that, the images and the sound and there's that theatrical opportunity. Like we wouldn't be able to do that without people like you. So thank you.
No, well, thank you. Thank you. K Pontuti, appreciate you. The Yellow Wallpaper, go find it on Amazon. And what were the other ones? Amazon, you said?
Amazon, iTunes, all the pay-per-view, Google's. Yeah.
Yeah, go Yellow Wallpaper. It won Best Feature Drama at SCIF 2022. Can't thank you enough. Hopefully we'll see you down here at another one. And hopefully when you get your next project done, you'll think of us.
I like going and watching movies. So,
come on down every December.
Come down and finally get to celebrate or something.
December 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th this year. We'll be here. And we're more than just film now. We're also comedy, music. We have a food festival coming. So it's just come, have fun for a couple, 4 days, meet great people, have great conversations, free your mind, and the rest will follow, as En Vogue said. And I just dated myself by saying that. Happy Friday, my friend. Thank you for doing this. It's such a pleasure, and I wish you much, much success. I wish the project much, much success. And that was it, guys. That was the next installment. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.